Let us welcome the Minister of Agriculture, Indar Weir.
Dennis, I thank you for reminding me that I had to transition from manual labor in the travel trade to technological labor and exploiting technology at a time when people thought that if I took your name and your telephone number and your passport number and sent you to the airport, I would be ripping you off because I didn't give you a piece of paper that had on your name and where you were going to. And perhaps that is where I would want to remind people that what technology has been able to do in our development is amazing. I have really enjoyed the history that Patrick gave us in terms of the agricultural sector, where we have come from and how we have evolved. And to my mind, you could have nothing more ingenious than people being able to create the type of tools that he displayed tonight to show us how you can actually drive a sector with little or nothing before you. And out of that kind of ingenious nature that he was able to exhibit from what they have created, it is the perfect platform through which we can then start to engage in a conversation about this 21st century requirement and how technology can be applied in agriculture. What Carl Simpson presented to you basically is all the secrets that I have in the ministry that we are currently working on, and I want to thank him for letting all Barbadians know that we are not sitting idly by, but that in truth and in fact, where we are transitioning the sugar cane industry, that a great degree of what is going to happen will be driven by the use of technology. But I, as minister, unfortunately, cannot sit and focus on one area. Patrick mentioned the poultry industry, and the document that I have before me speaks to structural weaknesses, it speaks to future viability, and of course, it speaks to opportunities. I would first want to address the future viability because of threats that have been mentioned and threats that really confront us in a real way. Let me make it very clear that when I was given the honor of serving Barbados as Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, one of the things the Prime Minister said to me is, and I'm going to repeat her, my man, I got food security onto this ministry because we must be able to address this issue. And then she said to me, if you are going to be a successful Minister of Agriculture, make up your mind to engage all the stakeholders and make sure that you're properly informed with what is required to take agriculture forward. Now, I'm going to stop there because there are other things that she told me, but the future will determine those. When I look at agriculture today, and perhaps many of the young people here tonight would join me in saying that, yes, we have done particularly well in terms of where we have come from. And where we have reached today, we have then encountered our challenges. But those challenges weren't all brought on out of a lack of willingness to proceed. Many of the challenges that confront us are brought on by other variables that confront agriculture. The one thing that confronts us that everybody would agree on, even though it appears to be a far out there or far yawn conversation, that we choose not to engage in the most meaningful manner. And I speak to climate change. And if I can speak to climate change in terms of what the potential fallouts can be in agriculture, then certainly we can then address the whole issue of the role technology can play. Climate change as we know it is a global phenomenon. It's not like it's going to happen and affect Barbados and the rest of the world will be spared. So what will happen clearly is that you're going to get shorter winters. You may get hotter days. You will get greater rainfall. But all these things are no longer seasonal as they used to be. So we are confronted by events of climate that may very well determine whether or not we would lose all of our crops at any given time, or at the same time, as Patrick alluded to, have challenges with the sugarcane industry simply because we've experienced so many droughts that you don't get the yield because the crops may not grow as they should. He is right in stating that through the cane breeding station that we have, or what is known to those in agriculture as the RVTU, that we have had discussion on how we can use research to be able to come up with the varieties that are drought resistant. And why this is important is because we are at that point now where we have to determine what we really want. And this is where I would address the structural weaknesses. We really want for Barbados is not necessarily a government footprint in commercial activity. We want for Barbados, though, to make Barbados a hub for research and development, where we can do and deliver most of the research and development under government and then help the private sector along the way. Why this is important? It is important because with climate change, you're going to see an increase and an influx of insects. Insects will change their eating patterns, and so many of the crops that we grow may be at threat. You're going to see insects, or what they call cross-border insects, where they travel from one direction to the next in order to survive. That is going to be a phenomenal challenge for us. Equally, there are going to be various types of pests that would invade agricultural fields and at the same time present greater challenges for agriculture than we happen to know now. This also we have to address. And the other thing is that when we seek to address these issues, the use of pesticides would impact us in a manner that we dare not start to allow ourselves to fall victims to. And when I say this, I talk about water runoff that we get into the aquifer. I talk about water runoff that we get into the coral reefs. And I talk also about the actual challenges and the risk involved in those who are exposed to the use of pesticides. Now, this for us presents a major challenge. So how do we address these challenges? And whilst it is true that I saw an excellent presentation from Carl and an excellent presentation from Patrick, let me first start by identifying the critical areas for us so that we can take advantage of opportunities that are before us to bring about the diametrical reversal in agricultural fortunes in Barbados. One, we first have to take into consideration opportunities for youth. If there's one thing that I know is a certainty, is that the young people of Barbados will drive agriculture in the future. Why is this so? Patrick raised the hoe. What is this in my hand? Can anybody tell me? This, most people will say a phone, and if they look at the back, they will say an iPhone. My reality is that this is neither, but it is an Apple handheld device which can do amazing things for us. And some of those things I would speak to as I go on. But opportunities for young people must now be at the core of what we do. And why is this so? Because when we were growing up, we adopted and adapted things that were common to us then. The young people are growing up today with these things in their hands. And what I see little children doing with these, I'm amazed at how they do them without fear. Put me on one of these now for the first time, and I start to use it. My first thing is fear. Will I damage it? Will I open something that I shouldn't open? Would I mess with the software? Those are all the things that confront me. those things don't confront young people. So they must be at the core of everything we do. In terms of economic activity, we can no longer consider agriculture the way we saw it before. Previously, it sounded easy to import most of the things that we wanted to consume. So if we wanted pumpkins, we imported those. We wanted carrots, we imported those. And like Patrick rightfully said, the farmers would then start to cry out because then we're introducing competition for them, but it was easy to import. And why it was easy to import, just remember what globalization has done for us. And where we are living in a globalized world now, you have to then respect certain trade arrangements under the WTO. And certainly within Quartet in the Caribbean, there are also certain trade relations that we have to follow as well. Now, what people seek to do and what many territories may seek to do is address these issues through what I call NTMs, which are non-tariff measures. So you find ways around it so that you can restrict importation of certain things. But our reality is that once we are on a global platform, we then start to have to determine how we can settle as a nation the way we can empower and enfranchise people. If we are going to do that, then there are a number of things we need to look at. One, what is required in agriculture today? Clearly, against the background of climate change, we need to be able to build out enough secure environments that can give us security in terms of food security and in terms of protecting our seed banks to the extent that if we were to be hit by an event and that transportation, which is the biggest problem in the region, is shut off. Transportation from North America, transportation from within the region. You are basically positioned in a place of chaos. And what is the first thing that a person would do if you have a climate event? The person who cannot get food would then seek to go looting. And that is where all the chaos would take place. So our first order of business is to determine how we're going to treat the whole issue of food security. And if we are going to do that, we cannot rule out the fact that there's now several options available to us in agriculture that we can pursue. Patrick spoke of hydroponics. Yes, there's hydroponics, and I must commend the farmers and all the success stories that we've got today with farmers going out there and taking the risks to be able to get involved in hydroponic farming. There's also aquaculture, where now you can do farming, where you produce freshwater fish, and at the same time, through a revolving system, those fish can turn around and feed your plants, and the nitrates will then go into feeding the roots of the plants, and you have a combination of fish farming, whilst you also have crops being grown. That aquaculture for us also is a big opportunity in terms of how we build out farming in Barbados and taking advantage of the technology that is available to us. But there are other areas, and whilst it is true that the engineers will be involved in terms of how we are going to build out any aquaculture project in Barbados and any major hydroponics project in Barbados, the one thing that we need to consider is how we treat the many of the idle buildings that we have available to us, especially under the IDC, and buildings that sit around that are not of use today. Now, I have been doing some research as minister, and I looked at Singapore. And what they've been able to do is take buildings and retrofit them with all of the chillers and all the lighting, etc., retrofit completely to be operated by mobile apps where they then can do farming from a mobile app. This is something that we are currently pursuing in Barbados. And what that basically speaks to, in Singapore, they're able to move to 10,000 heads in various varieties of lettuce per week through the use of technology. Now, if we were to think about that for a moment, we will start to understand the speed at which we can now turn out crops and the speed at which we can reap compared to what we are currently doing in open field agriculture. This type of opportunity we must pursue in a bigger way. And yes, there are farms in Barbados. You have 40-foot containers that are available right now that are currently being used. And those containers are being used to provide varieties of lettuces as well. But the scale is not there. And in order for us to get the scale in terms of how we treat to food security, then we need to go to expanded farms of similar types. And that is where then we get into greenhouse tunnels. And in those greenhouse tunnels, the number of things will take place that will not only seek to use technology or that are not only technology driven, but at the same time they will create new opportunities for business people in Barbados and new opportunities for our young people. What I speak to the chillers that will go in. I speak to the lighting systems that will go in. I speak to the vertical engineering that will go in. And I speak to the revolving water system that you would need. If we are going to do this, opportunities are created then for engineering, opportunities are created for the creation of apps, and opportunities then are created for young people to get involved. And of course, opportunities are created for renewable energy, whether we are using biomass or whether we are using what we've come to know Barbados for, and that is solar energy. Within our communities, there are people who are currently doing farming and are subjected to loss of crops through a different kind of predatory larceny. Not the fella looking like me or you that can go and steal the crops, but the one with a tail, an ugly head, and 4 feet. It's called a monkey. And they are daring enough now to come into the communities and destroy crops. How do we address this? Clearly, if we want to address the issues of food security and make sure that we have enough food to feed our people, you cannot exclude communities because this is what we have done well traditionally as a people. And so we have to hit this head on by introducing community greenhouses, doing exactly the same thing that a large greenhouse can do or that a greenhouse tunnel can produce. And the scale of those also will be high enough to be able not only to feed communities, but to be able to also create a business opportunity and enfranchise people in groups and communities. Those farms will come also with all of the technology and the opportunity for the use of renewable energy. And the current ones that I see in operation, and I think Busy will be happy to hear this because they're currently using solar energy. The use of solar energy is important in terms of how we integrate technology into agriculture and driving those systems with the chillers and the lights, etc. Because the one thing we will always have is sunshine. That is very important in going forward. We have taken a decision in addressing all of these issues and looking at all the opportunities available to us to introduce a project that is called the Farmers Empowerment and Enfranchisement Drive. And that project is seeking to do all of the things that I mentioned, but it works where young people, first of all, will be given opportunities to be trained directly on those greenhouse farms in communities and also at the BADMC and the BAMC. Those greenhouse farms would give them, those young people then, an opportunity to go away and become entrepreneurs through the setup of greenhouse farming that would be driven by apps. And I want to emphasize apps because it's one thing to say technology, but if you don't specify the type of technology you're going towards, then you obviously don't engage the minds that you're seeking to engage as well. And most of this is seeking to engage those young people who are now looking for an opportunity. What I found very encouraging, and I saw it repeated at the just concluded AgriFest, is the tremendous amount of young people who are interested in agriculture. And when people are saying young people are not interested in agriculture, I am living proof that that is just a myth. They are interested, but what type of agriculture they're interested in doing is the reality. They want to be challenged, and how they want to be challenged is to be able to create systems. Now, in order for them to create systems, we have to be able to guide them and tell them what it is that we are looking for within the sector, and then work with them to deliver what it is we are looking for. We have over $325 million of imports of food in Barbados annually. The last figures for 2016 stood at 325 million, and then because of certain changes that were taking place, it started to dip in 2017, but I'm sure it's way back up there when we do get the 2018 numbers. Why is this important? It is important because you cannot develop a sector without planning. And it's all well and good to say use technology, but at the same time, I can't have everybody planting lettuce. I can't have everybody planting cucumbers. And so this is where we have to control the planning as we seek to then match this against what we are importing. So we have looked at all the crops that we are currently importing. And through the feed program, we have said, look, if we can get the tourism sector or the hoteliers on board, if we can address issues with government procurement practices, if we can get the school meals on board, if we can get the polyclinics and the hospital on board, we have created our own market space. But we cannot do this successfully without getting all the distributors who currently own businesses in Barbados and importing food. Because were we to do that, then we start with a massive fallout. So we also have to engage them, and we also have to get them on board. But we cannot do this simply by talking and simply by saying, let us get them on board. There have to be a structured and organized plan for this. And that structured and organized plan is also through the use of apps, where what is it that we are going to do? We're going to plan the crops based on seasonality. Those crops will be planted based on demand and based on the statistics that we have before us right now. The availability in terms of reaping will be made available via apps. So all of the cucumbers, Barbados at any one stroke can tell all that we have available under a registered system. And why I say a registered system is that you're always going to have the person that is planting that does not come forward and be registered. And if we can do that successfully and then replicate it across all of the food crops that we're using, you start to understand the magnitude to which we can start to shrink this food import bill, but at the same time create major opportunities for people getting involved in agriculture through the use of technology. This, to my mind, is perhaps one of the greatest changes that would take place in agriculture, in addressing agriculture and technology under the current 21st century requirement. It is certainly not easy to execute. It is not going to be the easiest thing in the world to transition to, because I recognize that there are practices among us that we still going to have to address. But what I do know is that if we can start by addressing 50% of the challenges in terms of getting people to actually follow a plan, come to the training, use the systems that are available to them, don't take the training and then just fall off the wagon, and at the same time, allow the extension officers to help guide them along the way, then what will happen is that we are going to be able to achieve this simple objective. That will be done through the use of hydroponics, through the use of aquaculture, and certainly introduction of apiculture. And apiculture basically speaks to how we, what as people call harvesting bees in Barbados, and bees are very important. They are important for pollination, but bees are not dangerous by any stretch of the imagination. That is the story that we must tell. And we have people who are certified in apiculture in Barbados. And the way we are hoping to do it is under these environments as well, where you will have the bees housed, but then the other plants that we need to have them pollinate within that environment, they can come out and pollinate. Now, apiculture, to my mind, is very, very important as we go forward. And I don't want to touch the most sensitive area that will perhaps come up in due course in agriculture, and that is the use of medicinal plants. But what I will say to you is that it's going to be critical, because you don't want to have cross-pollination where bees are going on strains of plants that are not fall within a legal framework, to pollinate plants within a legal framework, then to create problems that that will change the plan forever. All right, so it is very important that we also look to the development of apiculture as well. And clearly, what comes over to me, and what comes over in all the conversations I'm hearing, is the transition now of agriculture from the traditional way to the more contemporary way through the use of these systems that are available. Let me state for the records, though, that we will never, ever be able to get away from traditional open field agriculture. If we're going to look at our tubers, the best place to grow them is in open field. And so cassava, which is going to form a big part of our plans going forward in terms of providing feed for animals, must be continued to be planted in an open field environment. Sweet potatoes, yams, edels, Patrick. We must continue with those, and certainly sugarcane. We will have our discussions in terms of how we treat the cotton, but cotton is something that we have to put back on the table, and we have to put it back simply because of the value chain that it presents for us and the level of foreign currency earning that it can give to us. Technology in terms of reaping the cotton is where we are currently having our discourse. And so no matter how you look at it, no matter how we discuss agriculture, the one thing that we do know is that we must now transition to the use of technology in order for us to be able to achieve the deliverables that we are looking for in terms of renewable energy, in terms of empowerment and enfranchisement, in terms of economic activity, in terms of reduction of food imports and saving the foreign currency, and in terms of training and certification for young people and the development of apps. I've said all that to say to you that I believe that all of us have a role to play, but our engineers have a particularly important role to play. If I were to drive you up to 6 rows now and say, look at one of these bonds, how do we then seek to retrofit this bond with all of the engineering, technology that we're going to introduce in it, so that you go to vertical farming and you're not necessarily looking to use soil, but again, that rotation system that I spoke about, the engineers will have to be the ones to guide us. Now, all the information is out there, but we do not advise ourselves in the ministry. So there's an opportunity for us to work with the engineers as well to get opportunities like those unfolded and become real. But you don't stop there, because there's agro-processing and all of our seasonings and the condiments that we can use, but particularly the way we pack, and Carl spoke to HACCP certification and ISO certification. These things will foist upon us a reality that we must look to technology to create that sanitized environment that will be required for packing of fruits and vegetables in order to be delivered to market. But what is more is that post-harvest requirement. In order for us to maintain quality would mean then that you have to use some kind of solar energy to drive the chillers whilst the vehicles are transporting, or some form of electricity that will be run through biomass energy or one of the others that are available. However you look at it, you cannot get away from technology if you're going to transition agriculture to what is required to make Barbados, first of all, food secure, but secondly, create the environment and opportunities for all of our people. The last thing I want to touch on, and I deliberately left this for the last because I know how it upsets Patrick. And in our discussions, he doesn't call it prairie larceny, he calls it something else. And I will leave him as we speak tonight to decide if he wants to expose that. But prairie larceny, we have to address. And I've looked at some solutions. And again, technology confronts us. First of all, our security systems have to be driven properly by technology. And we can put up the cameras, or we can put up the lights, etc., but we still need surveillance. And in a proper surveillance system, we cannot rule out technology in terms of drone technology. Drone technology that is also controlled by remote access, where you can do surveillance of fields within a short space of time and be able to detect and photograph what is taking place in those fields. So this, for us, represents a great opportunity for all Barbadians to benefit, but at the same time for us to take a holistic technological approach to the development and transitioning of agriculture in Barbados, while seeking to address climate change, while seeking to reduce our food import bill, and while seeking to empower and enfranchise our people. I want to thank you.
Thank you, Minister Weir.